Figuring out a kid with challenges is hard to describe.
It was like a Rubik's Cube, but I couldn't move my hands.
This is life with a child who has ADHD.
You know how you just keep turning it and you can eventually match all the colors? So I'm holding it like he's a Rubik's Cube, and I'm just holding it, and I can't even twist it to figure the solution out because I don't, where do I even start at?
Where to start? It can be demoralizing. For Mantu Joshi, a different metaphor comes to mind.
I was drowning, and I'll be honest, I was drowning as a parent. I was overwhelmed.
Today we're going to hang out with Mantu. I really wanted to take the time to let you hear his story more fully, because it's worth it, and because it's a story about resilience, which is a core idea of this podcast. Mantu has a master's in divinity, and he's a pastor and a chaplain. And he's the father of 3 girls.
This winds back a bit for me about 6 or 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. At the time, we were caring for 2 kids with special needs. And we also then ended up having a 3rd child who we didn't know at the time, but she ended up being dyslexic. About the time our oldest daughter was about 1.5, she was a real handful. And we just decided, you know what? My spouse was starting to feel pretty frayed.
One thing you should know about Mantu's wife, Heidi, she's blind.
And so having a child with the kind of neurobehavioral issues that were going on, while my spouse handled it great, it was just harder because now this child was mobile, right? Uh-huh. Moving around and running. And we just decided, this might be the time for us to change hands, pass the baton. Mm-hmm. And so my spouse became the primary wage earner, and I left, what was my dream job at the time, like so many parents do. And then I became the stay-at-home dad to see what we could do. And at the time I had thought that it would be, a year, maybe 2 years, just to kind of help her get her grounding. But I didn't really understand just the needs that she would have. And then we ended up having another, fostering another child. And in the midst of that, it just became overwhelming. I couldn't even shower every day. Mm-hmm. Just having 5 minutes to quick run into the shower was the best that I could do. This is way harder than I could have ever believed. And I realized that I was way in over my head.
Wow. But this story isn't going the way you expect. It's actually the story of how Mantu became a writer.
My spouse, said to me, you know what? You need to do something. Because I can see that you are not making it.
Yeah.
And I had to agree with her. And my spouse turned to me and just said, I think you should write. You don't know this about yourself, but you are a writer.
Oh.
And she said, I don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to find a way that you can write. And so what we did was we carved out an hour and a half a week where I could just go to a coffee shop and write. And we found somebody who could actually watch the kids, which was really difficult to get the respite. And I went to a coffee shop. I ran to a coffee shop so that I would have enough time. And I sat down and wrote for, hour and 15 minutes or whatever I had, and then ran back home to pick up the kids. And I did that every week for nearly 2 years.
This is A Little Easier. I'm Kendra Wild. What Mantu Joshi ended up writing became his book called The Resilient Parent.
And after a couple of months, I started to realize that it was becoming something, that the writing was becoming something. And it started to become more of a realization that I was writing for myself, but I was also writing for other parents. And it sounds cheesy, but it was just an act of love. I just started to imagine other parents. And eventually that became a reality in that the kids were able to go to a nursery school, and I was with other parents of kids with special needs, and we met in a Portland coffee shop. So when I started writing from that point on, I just imagined that group of parents, and I wrote to them. I wrote things that I couldn't have said to them directly, because we can't really give each other advice. That's not really a great way of being empathic. But so many of the questions that I began to ponder with the book were real questions that were coming up in our coffee conversations.
And so he wrote about resilience. But what is a resilient parent to Mantu? And what does it have to do with penguins, which is the cover image on Mantu's book? We'll get to the penguins in a little bit, but to answer the question about resilience, he again goes back to what he's learned from his wife.
Heidi is, just kind of remarkable in her own journey. And she was someone who's been blind since birth. And because of that, she already had this well of resilience, kind of this mental discipline of knowing when to invite voices in and when to shut voices out. She has been a teacher, a professor in a medical school and in residencies.
Wow.
As a person who's blind. And when we have this kiddo with special needs, it wasn't her first rodeo. And so she kind of knew and kind of helped me. And as we began to kind of process with each other, she kind of knew what it takes to have this kind of framing. I call it a disability frame.
A disability frame. What does Mantu mean?
Where we're able to kind of see the disability, and rather than to think of that as abnormal, but to begin to say, no, this is our normal. This is normal for us. And everybody else who's saying that this is abnormal, that we're weirdos, or that we're just not doing it right, that we don't have to listen to those people. We can find the people who get it. Like for instance, she has people who are blind who get it. Sometimes those of us who are sighted, we don't understand that they can do whatever the heck they want to do. They're just going to do it completely differently. That same thing, that we can do this parenting thing, but we're going to have to do it differently.
Mantu says he began his life as a stay-at-home parent with completely the wrong idea about resilience.
So it's basically, you're going to be able to figure this thing out despite the fact that you have all these stressors coming at you all the while. And most of us, I think, at least I was, thinking of resilience in those terms, right? This is something I can muscle through. I can power through.
Yep.
I can be the super parent. I can put on the cape. Here we go.
Burn me out.
Yes. I'm gonna do everything I can to fix this child or these children. I'm gonna do it. And one of the ahas for me was that I began to realize that was killing me, right? And research kind of has shifted since that time to really say that resilience is not so much something that you just work through. And the way that I say it is, resilience is a process of growth and development through adversity. It's adaptation. It's a way that we change and we allow ourselves to change.
Okay, so that brings us finally to the penguins. What's the penguin thing?
When we were doing The Resilient Parent, my publisher sent me a copy of the cover. And originally the copy of the cover that they gave me was a rubber band ball.
Oh.
Because the idea was that resilience would be that we'd snap back, that we would bounce back. And I came back to him, I said, absolutely not. because that is the opposite of what we are teaching here.
Yeah.
What we're sharing is that we can't bounce back. That's the point. That we are going to become different people than we were before. And we'll never go back. So the cover has a penguin on it, and And that was because I had asked, and my sister actually came up with this when I said the rubber bouncing ball is not going to work. I need another image.
Uh-huh.
And my sister came up with this penguin, and it was because she was thinking, you know, penguins are kind of famous for often having the male who stays with the egg and keeps the egg warm.
Oh, yeah.
And since I was a stay-at-home dad, she thought that would be a great image.
Yeah.
But for me, it was even more so that penguins are birds that have learned to fly underwater. And so for me, this idea that an animal could, instead of flying through the air, could fly through frigid, cold Arctic waters. And when you see them underwater, you can see they are flying. They're not just swimming, they are flying underwater. And it's one of the most beautiful things to watch. And they're just as beautiful as the birds in the air. But they're in this place where every other creature could not possibly survive. But they've adapted. And for me, Kendra, it was such a beautiful image of what I think parents and parenting kids with special needs can be. You know, that we can still fly. We just have to learn how to do it sometimes underwater.
So what Mantu is teaching us is that resilience isn't about returning to the same normal as before. It's about accepting our new normal. Here's another way to think about it.
I was standing by a traffic circle not too long ago, and I was watching the cars kind of go around in circles, and some people call them roundabouts.
Yeah.
Most of us who are Americans are completely confused when we get into a traffic circle, because we're like, why is this in our country? What happened? You know, and we get into the traffic circle, and we're trying to figure it out. And our instinct when we get into a traffic circle is to go around and come back out the way we came in, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so difficult for in a traffic circle. But most of us know that the whole point of a traffic circle is to come in one way and then to go out a different way. But most of us, and I think especially those of us who are parents with kids with any kind of neurobehavioral issues or any kind of differences, most of us are trying to go into our situation as parents and come out as the same person.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like the person going around the roundabout, and we're going around and around and around and around, and we're driving ourselves crazy because we're like, I have to go out the same way I came in. But if we would just accept that we are going to need to adapt, we're going to have to become a different person. Mm-hmm. That there is a letting go of where we came in. And there's a new place that we're going to be coming out. If we could just get to that point of acceptance, so much would fall into place.
Yeah. I love that that metaphor, because it's true. I think a lot of people think of a bouncing ball as the resilience metaphor, right? You will just bounce right back to where you were as soon as you get everything back in order. And
yeah, we'll bounce back. And for many people, that's, that realization is a grief process. Mm-hmm. That we are not going to have the same careers necessarily, or at least they may take a different shape.
Yeah.
There may be some pause buttons that we weren't expecting. The literature, I'm sure, but there's so many people whose partnerships and marriages sometimes do not survive having and so there's pieces of grief, and ironically just the fact that we share that with each other as parents can be so healing. Say, I am, this pain is real, and amazingly it doesn't leave us in that pain place. It leads us to another place in the traffic circle when we're willing to enter into that grief.
So I'm really intrigued by your training as a chaplain. How did some of that experience impact your perspective?
So much of what I learned as a chaplain was not how to kind of, you think that you're going to come in, you're going to fix people's grief, right? You're going to fix people's pain. That's what we think of when we go into the training. And when I actually was trained, I began to realize that so much of the training is fixing ourselves as practitioners, because coming into a room where people are having the worst day of their lives and being at calm, being centered, being ready to help those people to engage with whatever they're dealing with, something that's incredibly dysregulating. Their whole world's been turned upside down. And to have those skills to be your best self and to walk into that room, to be at that moment of calm. I went within an hour. I met with a family that had literally their house had been hit by a tornado. Went from that to another room where someone had just lost a child. Went from that to somebody who had permanent burns. I worked in the burn unit as well.
Oh, wow.
And was dealing with excruciating pain, right? And as somebody who's coming in to help with people, all of those traumas begin to kind of just come right into your body. Right? There's just no way around it. And so some of our training was, how do you manage, within an hour, this much stress at once? I began to realize that training was actually helping me as a parent.
Oh, I can imagine in so many ways. Wow.
I began to realize that it was so much more about presence.
Yeah.
Being present with them. In the book, I talked about a time where my daughter just couldn't sleep very well. And we kept trying to fix things. And I began to realize that at some point that she just needed me to be present with her. And our big breakthrough was when I just got her, just kind of got her beanbag and crawled up on the floor and just said, "I will be here with you."
Oh.
And, that was straight out of the chaplaincy training of being able to just be with people, because sometimes that's all people need to begin to find themselves, to regulate, and to begin to find their own resilience in the midst of things. Yeah.
That's, how do you stay calm in the heat of the moment? What are your sort of go-to in the moment, I'll call it self-care strategies, but coping strategies for regulating yourself? Well,
I have some pretty good, cheats, for lack of a better word, ways to kind of quickly deal. Some of those things I learned as a chaplain, actually, where I had, and the things that we did are quite simple, really. Very often we would have something, like some of us would have something that was symbolic in our pockets of wholeness and wellness. For me, I had the image of the penguin. I actually had a penguin keychain in my pocket at times, or just something that would remind me of wholeness. And what that does for our bodies is that when we kind of hold or touch, and we're kind of aware sensory wise of that object, it snaps us into the present.
Yeah.
And so we're not sort of living into the trauma of where we just were. For the chaplain, it's literally the room where I just was. I am no longer there. I am here, and I'm not yet at the next room yet. Right? I'm walking in between, and I'm taking moment. I'm breathing, and I'm sensory wise. I'm aware of my body, or I'm aware of something that I'm holding and what it feels like. And parents can do this too, just having an object, a keychain, something in their pockets that you just kind of hold on to and just say, okay, that feels smooth. That feels shiny. That feels good in my hand. It feels cold today. Whatever it is, you just, that little observation snaps us into the present. And we're not forecasting all the bad things that are happening in the future, how we're going to problem solve, how we're going to fix this, right? Because we're fixers as parents. Right? We're fixers. We think that we're going to come in and save the day again and again. And by having something that tears us away from solving the problem, and snaps us into the present, right? And just that little act of doing that takes us out of the trauma.
So my name is Sarah, and I have 2 children. I think for us, our parenting journey started as many parenting journeys do. Our daughter hit all the milestones she needed to. You assume that a second pregnancy is going to go the same. The second child's going to be similar, and that's just not what happened.
Sarah's son was initially diagnosed at the age of 3 with what was then called PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. It was a catch-all diagnosis that's not used anymore, but it describes someone who's on the autism spectrum.
He's always been a little bit trickier. Some breathing instances when he was very young, one very severe, which we attribute to some of the delay, but just a totally different experience. I think at the initial diagnosis, there was that sadness. We weren't shocked. I can't claim that. You know, we expected it. But I think, there's that sadness that goes along with it. I think there's that changing. It sounds cliche, but you have these expectations for your child and maybe what they're going to become and what their life is going to be like. And then all of a sudden you think, well, that's all out the window. I mean, it's going to be okay. But it's going to be different than what you thought it was going to be.
The diagnosis pushed her family into unknown territory.
There's no guidebook. I think people say, when asked, would you like a boy or a girl? Well, it doesn't matter as long as the baby's healthy, but no one tells you what to do if the baby is not healthy. It's always hard to hear, even now at 12, to hear all the things that he has trouble with, all the things that are hard for him, all the things that are going to make his life more difficult, I think is crushing to a parent because you don't want your child to have to go through any of that.
Even navigating low stakes, everyday things can be unpredictable and challenging.
And so I think there is that fear of judgment, will my child be judged unfairly because of their invisible disability? Will I be judged? And or even is the situation just not going to work? I mean, can I take my son to a playground and it's just sensory overload? And is it even worth it? Is it even worth it to put us through this? Will I have to drag him kicking and screaming? I mean, there's all of those sort of anxieties and fears that run through your head. And I think sometimes, especially earlier on, it was easier to say like, oh, we're just not going to go. Like, we're going to sit this one out, or we're just not up for it today. And I think there are some times when that's okay. And I think there's other times where you have to push. And I think you have to push for yourself. And I think you have to push for your child.
And so they had to adapt. As Mantu would say, they had to learn to fly underwater.
I think we've just learned so much because of his diagnosis. I think, yes, would I love things to be easier for him? Of course. I would love for the world to be an easier place for him to be. But at the same time, I wouldn't change his personality. I love his truthfulness. I love his openness. He's very, very curious and very kind. And of course, like any child, he'll drive me absolutely crazy. But at the end of the day, he's a lot of, just so many good qualities. And I think for us, he's made us sort of a stronger family because we've had to sort of look at these adversities and figure things out.
And that's not to say that process was easy.
I was the more emotional one, and my husband is very pragmatic. And he would just say to me, he's going to be whatever his version of fine is, because we're going to make that so. So whatever fine looks like for him, that's our goal. And that was early on. And I think that's kind of been our mantra all along. Like, we're capable, we'll learn and we'll figure it out. But whatever his version of fine is, has to be what's right for him. There's going to be some, normalcy that we create out of all of this. It's just going to be different than what we thought.
You might still feel like reframing in this way in your own life, accepting your new normal, is far off. So I wanted to explore some tools you can use, particularly if your kid's behavior is really challenging.
So I'm Dr. Ann-Louise Lockhart. I'm a child and pediatric psychologist and parent coach.
Dr. Lockhart has a different term for reframing. She calls it the parent mindset.
So if your parent mindset is, well, I just want my kids to just be quiet and be obedient, and that's all I want to do, then you're going to see that any behavior that deviates from that is going to be colored by that lens, because, oh, then I must be a bad parent, or I must have bad kids because they're not doing X, they're not being quiet.
Here's how she coaches parents in her practice who are struggling with serious behavioral issues.
It's not about finding new, fresh ways to punish your kid. It's about you identifying what is your mindset about your child. So if you view your child as rude and manipulative and trying to, work one over on you and destroy your home and steal your looks, like if you're looking at them from that perspective, then yeah, everything they do is going to be annoying to you. That's your parent mindset. This kid is annoying. But if you can see them from a different perspective, that, oh, my kid wants to connect with me, or my kid wants attention, my kid needs recognition, they need to feel important, then we can see that, quote, annoying behavior as a plea for connection, a plea for being known or seen or understood.
And she says in her experience, that shift really works.
I found that when parents can then shift their mindset, they'll literally come back the next week and say, oh, I think we're good. And I said, oh, things got better? They're like, no, I got better. That's the key. It's your kid isn't going to automatically get better because you shift your mindset, but it's you seeing them differently. That's what changes. And then things do become more peaceful because then you're not nagging them and bickering all the time and correcting them all the time. It makes it peaceful. The home becomes more harmonious.
One of the keys to changing your mindset is paying attention to your own needs as well as those of your kids.
I have so many, especially moms, who come in and they feel bad because they don't want to play with their kids, or they don't want to hang out with their kids, or that they yelled at their child, and then they feel like a bad parent now because they were impatient. But then another day the child will do the same behavior and they're super sweet and they think it's hilarious. And I'm like, well, it's not that your kid is bad or that you're a bad parent. It's just that it sounds like you had different needs that were met or not met on different days, which is what happens. So on days when you were rested and ate well and maybe had some fun time to yourself, when your kid was making farting noises, you thought that was hilarious. But when you were working hard, didn't get any rest, and the house is a wreck, and they made the farting noises, now you're yelling at them and tell them to be mature.
Yeah.
The behavior didn't change. It's just your perspective changed.
Yeah, and now they're confused.
Right. Now they're confused. They're like, wait, Mom, you just thought that was hilarious last week. What's your problem today?
But is she telling us that our kids never need to be corrected? We should just let them behave however they want?
I think it all comes down to the same thing, is that we have to be able to accept our kid where they're at. Because if you don't, you run the risk of then destroying a relationship with them, because then everything becomes contingent on good behavior. If you stop sassing me, then I will connect with you. If you don't sneak out of the house, then I will spend time with you. If you don't, it's like we have all these, if this, then I will be the parent you need me to be. And we make all these things contingent on having a positive relationship with them. Because a lot of times parents think, well, I'm rewarding them if I spend time with them, if I play with them, if I hang out with them, and I'm saying their behavior is okay. I'm like, no, you're not. You're saying that I still accept you and I still adore you as a person, although I don't really like your choices right now.
She says parental love and acceptance is crucial, even for kids whose behavior has reached an extreme. Maybe even more so, right?
I've met with those kids, and what they tell me, the kids with oppositional defiant disorder, the kids who were in juvie, the kids who were on drugs, and then they're trying to get their life together, the thing that they're always saying is this need for wanting to just be loved and accepted by their parent. They know they're messing up. They know that they're not being the best kid. They know this already. Like, they beat themselves up enough already. They know that. But when they get that additional insult of a rejection from their parent after all of that stuff that they've done, it's heartbreaking for them. And so the thing that's healing is that connection. That's the major thing that's healing for them. Knowing that my family has my back, even through all of my decisions, all throughout my struggles, that's what kids ultimately need from their parent.
This dovetails so well with what Mantu Joshi's been telling us about our need to pay more attention to ourselves and our mindset.
So often we try to do everything we can to fix our child, and we totally miss that the best thing we can do to fix our child is ourselves not be depressed and overwhelmed and being in these unhealthy places that we find ourselves in. If we can be in a healthy place, that changes outcome. That changes the whole ball game. But we don't think of it because we're in the midst of it, and it just, all we can think about is, I just need to fix my kids so that they can be livable, that we can make this, if we're going to be honest and real, I just want to be able to live with this child and not feel like I'm pulling my hair out all the time. And, the paradox is really that when we begin to kind of understand ourselves, when we begin to kind of pull ourselves out of depression, when we begin to kind of find our own wholeness, our wellness, that takes care of so many things.
I just have to react to that. I love how he talks about paying attention to our own wellness. Mantu's really emphasizing this theme that we've heard over and over about how connected we are to our whole family. So next time on A Little Easier, we're going to talk even more about the family system. Having a child struggle affects everyone. It can impact the parenting partnership, and it can impact brothers and sisters too. And that's what we're going to dig into.
Daily schedules, daily routines are so centered around the child with a disability. It's easy for siblings to feel sort of lost and invisible.
Family matters in our next episode. But first, of course, we'll take a break for a micro-action moment. And who better to give us a moment of mindfulness than Mantu Joshi?
The biggest thing that I might say to people is, if there be any hope in all of this, is that we don't have to solve the puzzle. So much of our energy goes into seeing if we can just fix our kids in time before they become adults, or if we can just fix them in time before we have to do this next event, next family get together. We don't have to solve the puzzle. It's not a Rubik's Cube where we have to get all the colors on the right side. Our Rubik's Cube is going to be colorful. It's going to be mixed full of colors. And rather than trying to solve it and try to get our life back to the way it was, it's okay for the colors to be mixed up. You're going to be okay. This doesn't feel like it could ever be normal, but it will be. You're going to be okay. This new normal will come, and the solving does not have to happen, at least not today.
A Little Easier is written by Harriet Jones and co-produced by Harriet and Ray Kantrowitz. Sound design and original music by Ray. This podcast is brought to you by Wild Peace for Parents and me, Kendra Wild.